My job at Lowell here is to be the principal or the head administrator in the building. I've been doing this for 8 years, 8 wonderful years. I was placed here 8 years ago with a mission to recreate what Lowell looks like. It used to be a specialized school, and now we're a regular title building. We have about 20 different languages spoken in the home. We have quite a diverse population. We have approximately 400 students here, a high mobility rate, and so our kids come and go frequently. We have a wonderful staff of about 60 that meet the needs of the kids on a daily basis. Well, we do have a population that's very diverse, and so with that comes a lot of poverty, unfortunately, as well as some language barriers that maybe impact us on a day-to-day basis. And so just in a normal year, we would be dealing with attendance issues or low academic testing, and what are we going to do in regards to that? And so those type of things we deal with on a day-to-day basis. The last 2 years with COVID, we saw that heightened. Families would have a difficult time finding daycare for their kids, or because of COVID, they were maybe fearful of sending their kids to school because they didn't want them to get sick. And so we went through initially where we had a lot of families choosing to do virtual academy. We had probably 60 kids that went virtually right away. Once they got into it, they realized the difficulty of doing that. They didn't either have the resources or the time to put into educating their children, and so many of them came back to us. And so with the kids back that first full year, there was a lot of protocols and procedures we had to put in place to make sure that the kids were safe. We had dividers put up between the kids so that they had that proper distance. And with that process, though, although we were keeping kids safe in that way, we lost out on that ability for our kids to collaborate with each other in close partnerships, which is what they're used to. And so it was really kind of hard or challenging for teachers to figure out how can we re-engage the kids, or how do we engage the kids in learning when it becomes more of an independent learning process compared to a partnership. And so that was stressful, as well as frequent absences. And so now I'm teaching my classroom of 20 kids, but now I have 2 kids that are at home on remote, and how do I push out lessons to them? So there was a lot of stress with that, on top of personally when they're worried about their own families and them getting sick or their absences and having to create those assignments for them. And then my job as administrator, overlooking all of that, is although I didn't have to deal with it per se in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, I still had to run a building where I was ensuring families that the kids are safe. I'm ensuring families or teachers that they're safe, and then making sure that if they have to be home with their families for whatever reason that might be, their room is covered and the kids can continue learning like they're used to. And so there was that stress, and it was important to me as the administrator is to be empathetic to the situation, but also provide a sense of calmness, because it was, what's coming around the corner, and that fear of what is COVID and how's that going to impact us, and then all the absences and all the extra work that's on top of that. And then my job is making sure that I present that sense of calmness and everything will be okay, and that reassurance that it will be fine. Kids were out for a long period of time, oftentimes not doing the work like they're supposed to be doing, and then the teachers, continuing to push out that work, and the stress of I'm pushing it out, but no one's doing the work. And so there's just a lot of those types of stories. It was actually very similar to the fact that the teachers were doing the work to prepare the lessons, and sometimes it was being received by the students and sometimes it wasn't, and the stress that goes with that. And then there's moments where you have teachers would be out for long periods of time because they would either get COVID, and then a young child would get COVID, and then the other child would get COVID, or the daycare was closed. And so sometimes we had staff members that were out for a whole month. And then you can imagine how that not only impacts their personal life, but also how it impacts a building as a system, and making sure that we have the coverage. And then the guilt and stress that the teacher feels not being in the classroom to be with their kids. So although that COVID's been in our life for a couple of years now, there are things that came out of it that you have to look at in a positive manner. For example, I do think we've learned to appreciate the fact that being together in a classroom as a school family is a joyous experience. And I think we've realized that we do enjoy having the kids in the building where we can have those relationships with the kids, because we know that it's much easier to do that than when they're at home and we were having to push that assignment through them. My joy is being able to see the kids in the building every day. It was not the same when they were at home learning because you didn't have that connection. And every teacher in this building, or every staff member in this building does this job because they're very relational and they want to be around kids and they want to make a difference in kids' life. And that's hard to do when they're remote. And so I think the biggest joy for me is seeing the kids every day in school. They're happy to be here. They want to be here. And the smiles that they have and the excitement they have for being in the building. So that's the joy that's come out of this, is realizing that in person, being around kids is what energizes us and is the passion behind the job. Challenges there again is really making sure that that we're remembering our why behind all of this. And although it's been maybe flipped upside down, is really just always reminding ourselves why we're doing this job and the importance of what we do. It's challenging sometimes because in my story behind who I am as a person and my faith really has kind of been a journey over time. I was raised Catholic. I was in a very strong Catholic family where we did church, and that's just what you were supposed to do. But my faith maybe was I did it because my parents made me do it or required that of me. I really didn't have my own personal faith. That happened all the way through my whole growing up years. Even in college, I didn't attend church on a regular basis, but I always believed. I always had that faith, but I didn't necessarily, wasn't aligned with an organization or a church per se. It was my parents' church. It wasn't my church. And then about 20 years ago, I got breast cancer. And that's where my faith got challenged a little bit. And really, I remember the deciding factor in my life was got the diagnosis. I was laying on the bed crying and I was going, why me? Why me? And like literally out of the blue, as loud as can be, I heard God say, well, but why not you? And then I realized, yep. So then I realized how I had to tackle that. And so my faith got me through that process in regards to, this is what you're going to do. This is just your story. And it really changed me in regards to who I was. And so I really learned out of all of that is, don't sweat the small stuff. Not that COVID is a small stuff, but when you really look at relative to hearing a diagnosis that you could possibly die, to the day-to-day things that you're dealing with in COVID, I really had a sense of we can do this because God is here beside us to help us with this process. And so my mindset has always been, we can do this. There was stress with it, but it didn't drive how I handled things. It really was this sense of calmness that is just another part of our story with these kids. And the defining factor is how are you going to handle that? And how are you going to make sure that the students don't feel that impact, but yet knowing the importance of having to be there for them and protect them and keep them safe.